one is project management. Again, a simple point you would think is there are different project management methodologies. Today, you could have a feeling everyone does everything in Agile, which is not really true, but it sounds good. So a lot of the CPQ vendors all use Agile methodologies to do their implementations, right? And so waterfall would be I have my development period, then I do my testing period, and then I go live kind of thing. I do one thing after the other. That's not what's done for most of the CPQ vendors. Also, Model N, they use an Agile approach, which is fairly common. You have other teams which use a hybrid. That's a mix, obviously, between Agile and the waterfall method. And in a lot of cases, when I say Agile, at least from what I see, it's a lot of times it is Scrum, and there are other Agile methodologies that could be used, right? But that's what seems most common. I'm not sure if that's what you use in your companies. If you're not using it, it's definitely worth looking into this because it will have an impact on how the project is run. And so you need to check with your vendors also to see how do they usually run these projects? What does it mean for your project management? Is somebody just doing it on the side today? Somebody's not really 100% focused on this because you don't have enough projects. So that's something to keep in mind to see, does it impact you, or is that a no-brainer because you use it anyway? So that depends on you and what you do over here. What I also see is you have the level of project planning. So every vendor has their own idea on how the project should be run, right? So you should check with Model N, for example, in this case also, if I run a project with you, what does it really mean? And the system integrator you may be working with on this, do they run it differently? Is that the same? What does it mean for you? Do you run the same? It's really just an alignment question to make sure you're not running into any surprises over here. The decision makers, we need to name them. We mentioned the team a couple of times before. You should name all these and their backups. If somebody's on vacation, somebody's sick, somebody's traveling, make sure you have a backup for everyone. And when you also prepare a project plan or a product backlog, and whatever you call it in your terminology, right, I think one thing I've seen very often is you have very detailed project plans, 1,500, 2,000 item lines, and people try to communicate this. My suggestion is do not do it, because you will probably freak everyone out. They do not understand it. It is too much. You feel overwhelmed. So that's not good. If you have to have a detailed plan, by all means, go ahead and do it, but do not communicate the details to your team. You want to have certain time milestones that everyone knows and they are working towards. And that's as much as you should share from my point of view. I've seen this in big transformation efforts fail, where everyone tries to keep everyone up to date on whatever is planned and what the critical path is. I would suggest not to do that in a big style, because it proves more hurtful than it really helps at the end. Another thing over here is the different templates that need to be used. Different vendors, different system integrators, everyone has different ways how you document this. Maybe you have a way today yourself how you do that. Maybe you do it in an Excel spreadsheet or in a Word document, whatever document you use, Google Docs, Apple document, it doesn't matter what you use, but you need to decide what documents you really use. You don't want to pay to prepare a lot of paper that nobody looks at afterwards, right? So for me, the idea of this is to prepare the paper to ensure a certain quality, to make sure people think about this. Find out what you need, find out what your vendor needs, and find out what your system integrator wants. And you should do that up front so that you know what documents you create at what point in time for what purpose. And I would suggest, again, create what you really need, and that could be different for different companies. It depends on you what quality you want to have and how much you're willing to spend for this. Right.
Okay. So what I'm hearing here in terms of best practices is really you need to think through the approach you're going to take to the project, and in particular how much and how you're going to communicate that information through to the team and to your stakeholders. there is a considerable amount in your best practice of sort of teaming with your selected vendor, or if you have a systems integrator or a consultant in there working there, sort of seeing the methodologies and their best approaches. So let me kind of ask a sort of a different question. If I haven't selected, a tool, then how much of this can I do, and what are the most important things that I could do before the selection that are going to help me move that project forward?
Yep. No, that's a good point. If you have not decided on a CPQ tool just yet, right? So I would say in general, you need to know enough about the topics we discussed so far so that you can have a decent discussion with potential vendors, right? And in this case, that means to me I cannot go into all the levels of detail because I will spend a lot of time and money on things that will change afterwards anyway. I still need to know enough to make an informed decision, right? And I don't want to be spoon-fed by a consultant or anyone else to exactly what I need to do. I want to have information, so which means I need to know my requirements, I need to know my processes, I need to know my change management, my project management approach to a certain degree. And again, I'm just throwing out numbers, so don't take the numbers too serious. It just should give you some perspective. If you spend a week to understand the key points on this,
right,
then you will be good to go ahead and have a very good vendor selection process.
Right.
After you have selected a vendor, then you need to go into these topics in more detail anyway, because it needs to work with the vendor that you selected as well as the system integrator you're working with to install the solution.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Another question I wanted to ask you in this area is I've seen many sort of different approaches to trying to get faster time to value.
Yep.
In terms of how do I approach the deployment, the implementation, or the release of my CPQ functionality or to regions or what have you. Do you have any sort of best practices, tips to folks in terms of how do they accelerate those implementations and get value out to their end users?
Yep. So one thing I've seen which seems to work pretty well for most companies is you have for the CPQ vendors, you want to have someone internally that's sitting with the person who's setting up your product in the CPQ tool. You have to sit them side by side so that they learn from them. I don't want to have someone who is setting up a product for me in the CPQ tool, but as a customer, I don't know what exactly did they set up, what do I need to change when it's set up, right? So in this case, I still have the advantage of getting my products out quickly because whoever is doing the system implementation, they set up the product quickly, but I need to have someone on their side from day one, from my company, that actually goes there and says, how do you do that? Where is it going to be set up? Where do you document it? How do you document it? What's working, what's not working? So that you have this a very close alignment between vendor and customer from the start.
Okay, that's great. So one part of that is really sort of being there to absorb as much information as quickly and having somebody on your side that's willing to take responsibility for that.
Yep.
Right. Are there other approaches in terms of how I decide to roll it out or where I'm going to roll out the project that will help me accelerate time to value?
So there are different approaches on how that could be done, obviously, right?
Right.
So
It's,
what one key thing is, first of all, you want to have a quick proof that the project is working, right?
Yeah.
So there shouldn't be any plan to have something in a year, right? So what I've seen working is you want to have rollouts every 3 months.
Okay.
You want to have a consistent basis on when you deliver value, and it's people can see it, right? So your talk and what you do matches. Very powerful. You don't need to talk about it a lot. That's very key. What goes along with that is a good plan of where you roll out functionality, right? And that depends a little bit on the appetite for risk of every customer. So I've seen customers who want to roll out across a large region with a lot of their product offering right away. You have others who just want to limit the geography where they roll out something. They don't want to do it with all the products, right?
Okay.
So that's very customer specific, but I think something that seems to be universally accepted is the rollouts need to happen fast. So it's,
great.
Yep.
So plan for that, at least at the high level, to start rolling out functionality relatively quickly and sort of on a repeated basis over maybe a quarter or 4 month kind of period.